One might begin in the dusty archives of the Inquisition in Toledo, where the records of the Alumbrados trials still rest, if they have not been destroyed and scattered, if the worms and the damp and the deliberate hand of suppression have not reduced them to fragments. The documents that survive are partial, fragmentary. They tell us less about what the Alumbrados actually believed than about what their accusers found threatening. The heresy is always defined by the orthodoxy it offends, and orthodoxy, in turn, is defined by the heresy it must exclude. The two are locked in a dance of mutual constitution, each giving shape to the other. The Alumbrados, those Enlightened Ones of 16th century Castile, emerge from the archive as phantoms, figures glimpsed through the distorting lens of inquisitorial suspicion, their voices filtered through the hostile transcription of their interrogators. Isabel de la Cruz, the Beata of Guadalajara, who gathered followers in the household of the Duke of Infantado and taught a doctrine of passive abandonment to the divine will. Pedro Ruiz de Alcaraz, the accountant of revenues, who articulated the theological underpinnings of dejamiento with a precision that would later be condemned as heretical. And behind them, the shadow of Maria de Santo Domingo, the ecstatic visionary whose prophecies had once been welcomed by Cardinal Cisneros himself, before the winds of orthodoxy shifted and what had been celebrated as mystical fervor became suspect as diabolical delusion. These figures inhabited a landscape of spiritual ferment, a Castile in the aftermath of the Reconquista, where conversos, converted Jews and their descendants, sought to prove the sincerity of their faith through a devotion so intense that it threatened to dissolve the boundaries of orthodoxy itself. The Alumbrados were not exactly a sect. They were not an organized movement, but rather a network of spiritual seekers united by a common conviction that the soul could experience God directly, without the mediation of priests, without the machinery of sacraments, and without the elaborate architecture of scholastic theology. This was not in itself a new claim. The mystical tradition of Christianity had long asserted the possibility of unmediated union with the divine, but the Alumbrados pushed this claim to its logical extreme, insisting that the illuminated soul became impeccable, meaning incapable of sin, and that external observances became superfluous for those who had achieved this state of perfection. The love of God that dwelt in the heart of the Enlightened One was, they claimed, God himself. This was pantheism, or something very like it, and the Inquisition, not unreasonably, took alarm. The Alumbrados, like the Quietists who came after them, represent a recurring challenge to the logic of institutional religion. If the soul can find God without the church, if the inner light suffices without the sacraments, then what is the purpose of the priesthood? What is the function of the law? What remains of the authority that the Church claims to derive from its apostolic succession? These are the questions that the Inquisition sought to suppress, but not through argument, by force. The Edict of Faith in 1525, with its 48 condemned propositions, was a declaration of war on the interior life, a refusal to countenance the possibility that the human soul might have direct access to the divine. The subsequent trials, the abjurations, and the public penances, the wearing of the San Benito, these were rituals of humiliation designed to reassert the authority of the institution over the individual conscience. And yet the teachings persisted. They surfaced in the Quietist controversies of the 17th century, in the writings of Molinos and Guyon and Fenelon. They surfaced in a different form in the Protestant appropriation of contemplative spirituality, in the Quaker tradition of silent worship, in the Methodist emphasis on the inner witness of the Holy Spirit. The Dominicans, as I've said in an earlier video, were the theological police of the Catholic Church. They were the ones who staffed the Inquisition and drafted the edicts, conducted the trials, pronounced the judgments. They were the hounds of the Lord, hunting down heresy wherever it might be found. They were also, in their own way, mystics. Albertus Magnus and Thomas Aquinas were among the greatest contemplatives of the medieval church. The Dominican tradition of mysticism, rooted in the writings of Pseudo-Dionysius and the Rhineland mystics, was not intrinsically hostile to the interior life. What the Dominicans opposed was not mysticism per se, but mysticism that escaped institutional control and claimed to supersede the sacraments. They opposed mysticism that threatened the authority of the Church. This is the paradox at the heart of the Dominican opposition to the Alumbrados, the same order that produced Meister Eckhart and Johannes Tauler. Catherine of Siena produced Torquemada and the machinery of the Inquisition. The same impulse that led Dominic to preach against the Cathars, to meet heresy with reasoned argument, led his successors to employ torture in the service of orthodoxy. The same commitment to the truth that inspired Aquinas' great synthesis inspired the suppression of theological dissent. We can see in this a kind of tragic irony, a reminder that the pursuit of truth is always shadowed by the temptation to coerce, and the defense of orthodoxy always risks becoming the persecution of difference. The Dominicans were not wrong to oppose the antinomian excesses of the Alumbrados, the claims of impeccability that led to moral license, and the rejection of sacramental discipline that threatened the cohesion of the Church. But the means they employed, the machinery of the Inquisition, the torture, the destruction of lives, betrayed the very truth they claimed to defend. The concept of spiritual bypassing, as articulated by contemporary psychologists, offers a helpful framework for understanding the Alumbrados and their critics. Spiritual bypassing is the use of spiritual beliefs and practices to avoid or bypass uncomfortable emotions. It is a defense mechanism, a way of escaping the hard work of emotional and psychological development. The Alumbrados, in their emphasis on dejamiento, passive abandonment to divine will, certainly seem to have engaged in a form of spiritual bypassing. By claiming that the illuminated soul could not sin, they avoided the uncomfortable work of self-examination and moral improvement. By insisting that external observances were superfluous, they escaped the demands of institutional discipline. By elevating interior experience over objective moral law, they created a framework in which anything could be justified as the promptings of the Spirit. Consider the ones who bear testimony to what was lost. The ones who remember what the official histories have forgotten. Isabel de la Cruz, who was tried and imprisoned, who abjured her errors and wore the San Benito, who died in obscurity, her teachings suppressed, her voice silenced. Consider Pedro Ruiz de Alcaraz, the accountant of revenues, whose theological sophistication earned him a place in the Inquisition's files, whose precise formulations of dejamiento were condemned as heresy, and whose family was impoverished by his persecution, and the countless others whose names have not survived, whose lives were destroyed by the machinery of orthodoxy. But the Alumbrados are not entirely forgotten. Their teachings survive in the records of the Inquisition, in the writings of their critics, yes, in the fragments that have been preserved, and their spirit survives in the ongoing tradition of mystical spirituality, in the Quakers and the Pentecostals, in the retreat centers and the prayer groups, in all the places where the human soul still seeks direct communion with the divine.